Right, welcome everybody. Thank you for coming. Can I just have one request? You turn your phones off if you haven't done so. I don't know about you, but my ringtone is deadly embarrassing, so I would like that to be on the video. So make sure your phones are turned off. So welcome to the next University of Manchester Sustainability Seminar. My name is Professor Amanda Bamford. I'm the academic lead for sustainability here at the University of Manchester. And I don't know about you, but I've been really looking forward to today's talk. I think it's a really hot topic at the moment. There's a lot of news in the TV, in the newspapers, and in the media about this topic. And I think that's reflected by the brilliant audience we have here today. So we've got two speakers. And we're also going to really encourage you to ask questions of the speakers afterwards. They've been forewarned, so don't worry. And the title is Fixing Fashion. So I'm sure you're all aware that fashion at the moment is in the news because it's one of the world's second greatest polluters. We might argue about whether it should be second or first. And our speakers today are going to be talking about how we could tackle and fix and work towards addressing this environment impact around fashion. So our first speaker is Dr. Patsy Perry. Welcome. She's a senior lecturer in fashion marketing and retail here at the University of Manchester. Her expertise includes the environmental and social impacts of fashion. She's published widely, and she's been on TV, I understand. I'll be interested to find out how that went. BBC Breakfast.
Yeah.
BBC Newsbeat, and various other BBC Radio 4 as well. And also she's been in newspapers, The Telegraph, The Independent Observer, which just shows you the great interest around this topic at the moment. So welcome.
Thank you.
Patsy, and I'll let you give the floor to you.
Thank you very much. Welcome everybody. Great to see such a good turnout for this, and fantastic to know that there's so much interest in this really important topic. So I'm going to give an overview of the main environmental impacts and the critical points at which the environmental impacts are happening in global fashion supply chains before Xuqing goes on to more specific aspects of solutions. A little bit about me. I've been here at University of Manchester teaching for about 6 years now. I teach on the fashion business programmes in the Department of Materials. My PhD was looking at more social sustainability aspects, but I've published widely on my work, and I also wrote an article 2 years ago for theconversation.com on the environmental costs of fast fashion, which got picked up and went viral. So that's, I think, why I've been invited on BBC Breakfast and often quoted in the press and so on. So you can see that there is very wide stakeholder interest in this topic. And you may be aware that we have a big parliamentary inquiry, and the report was published this year looking into the sustainability of the fashion industry. So it's certainly something that's very high on the agenda for very important stakeholders, both here and abroad. So first of all, it's good to understand what global fashion supply chains are like and some of the pressures that we experience in this industry, which is maybe a little bit different from other industry sectors. So we have massive geographical dispersion of production activities. So fashion supply chains actually start off either in the petrochemical industry for synthetic fabrics or in agriculture for natural fabrics such as cottons, wools and so on. They go all across the world. And you may have heard there's often a lack of transparency, so it's often very difficult for lead retailers or lead brands to understand who actually is a member of their fashion supply chain. We have very big vertical disintegration, so ownership of production is not really the case in the fashion industry. That tends to be outsourced to a global network of subcontractors and third-party suppliers. There's also a big lack of uniform standards. So when companies are operating across different geographical territories, there's no one, environmental protection legislation. It's different everywhere they go. And often if they're going into developing countries to access, lower costs and bigger pools of labour and so on, then the standards can be lower than what we might find in the home market. Production is very labour intensive as well. So we do use a lot of people even in the raw material stage. So to come on to that later when we talk about the impact of some of the environmental issues on actual people and their quality of life in the wider areas of the supply chain. And then finally, probably most important, there's a huge amount of cost and speed pressure in fashion supply chains. So manufacturers, suppliers are being pressured to reduce costs, speed up delivery and so on in order to feed this consumer demand of people wanting to have things on trend at low prices, quickly and accurately. So this is the background, which might explain some of the things that are happening. We also then need to move on to fast fashion. So fast fashion is an interesting business model which has been kind of at the forefront of the arguments around what's happening now. So fast fashion is even faster, even more pressure for cost and lead time. So based on much more frequent injections of novelty for the consumer. And this has been read by online retailers who are even faster than the original retailers such as Zara and H&M, which first started out in this area. So they don't have stores, therefore they don't have to pay for that part of the business, but they use marketing tactics to really encourage people to buy more frequently purchase things, and then frequently dispose of things using influencer marketing, social media marketing, and so on. So sometimes we find that actually this clothing is not really worn at all. It may be worn once, twice, disposed of. Sometimes it's not worn at all. When things are returned because they're not suitable for the consumer, there have been stories that have surfaced this year of retailers actually sending stock to landfill that's coming back as consumer return because they don't have the resources to actually process those things and put them back out into sale for other consumers. So they're just binned when we return things that we don't want. So we can see that the huge amounts of work, effort, human input, environmental resources and so on that go into producing the fashion garments, all of that is really wasted, especially when the garment lifetimes are so short or the garment is not even worn at all. We're seeing anomalies, similarities between single-use plastics, and people are saying that now fashion is the single-use plastic scandal of the future, and it's seen as a disposable item. So not like in the olden days where we would keep things, mend them, repair them. It's really not worth doing nowadays because the cost and the ease of buying something new is so much greater than ever before. And the environmental impact is multiplied for things that have much shorter product life cycles that may not even be worn at all. So you may have seen this was critiqued very much this year. So the £1 bikini from fast fashion retailer Misguided, which kind of flies in the face of everything that we're doing around trying to use more sustainable sources and so on. But why are we putting things out like this? So it's actually much less than the price of a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, isn't it? So then what does that communicate to the consumer? There's a lot of talk around how consumers are responsible for some of the environmental impacts, but the messages that are coming from the brands, it is making us think a certain way, and this doesn't encourage consumers to keep hold of their things and see them as valuable. So the environmental impacts really go around water pollution, water use. Much of this happens in more developing countries because we don't really have the production in Western Europe or here in the UK. So often the environmental impacts aren't actually visible to us as consumers. But we have to remember that actually with internationalisation of consumption and retailing, that fast fashion is no longer just low-cost clothing produced in developing countries for Western consumers, but fast fashion and fashion itself is consumed by people in the global south as well as the global north. So as economies are developing and people have greater spending power, they also want to engage in fashion consumption. There's a greater move towards adopting Western styles of dressing. So this problem is global now, and it's not just Western consumers that consume fashion as we thought. So the picture of the dog in Mumbai surfaced a couple of years ago, which kind of says everything. And we have rivers in Indonesia is probably the most famous polluted river in the world. And then the textile waste problem. So this is increasing because of the increasing volume of stuff that is being produced and the quicker disposal of the stuff that is being produced as well. And this is really the problem for the UK. So the parliamentary inquiry in terms of what's happening in the UK, we're not having this, but what we are having is the landfill problem. and in future we'll have to pay to dispose of our waste. Will we see extended producer responsibility where fashion retailers are responsible for taking things back when the consumers finish wearing them? Pesticides and chemicals as well affect human health, so it's not just about making the environment ugly and harmful, but there's very significant human health issues from the chemicals that are used for communities that live around those areas, such as cotton farmers, people that live around textile dyeing and processing facilities. So they can cause some quite serious effects, such as skin problems, but also birth defects and neurological problems, and lead to early death. And then, of course, we've got the microplastics issue, which has come to the fore recently. So this has been known about in the industry for some time, but I think only recently it's become visible to the consumer, so that when we are washing synthetic items, then the tiny little fibres come off of them, end up in the water stream, which is global, and then the fish end up eating them, so we end up eating plastic. And they've even found microplastic filaments in bottled water, which you may be aware of. So it seems that there is actually no escape. So there's talk around fitting washing machine filters and so on, but we have to remember that out of the whole population in the world, most people don't use a domestic washing machine. So whatever we do in terms of our washing, water goes everywhere, doesn't it? So it's an incredibly difficult solution. So now I'll look at some specific critical points then. So water use is one of the main criticisms of the fashion industry when certain peoples around the world do not have access to fresh water for drinking purposes, and we use such huge volumes of water for making clothing that maybe doesn't even get worn at all. So Stacey Dooley did a BBC documentary, I think, was it last year, the Price of Fashion, in which she confronted some shoppers on a UK high street, and they were absolutely flabbergasted to know exactly how many litres of water goes into the average pair of jeans. So it is a phenomenal amount of water, both in terms of growing cotton. So cotton is a very thirsty plant. It requires a lot of water, but we also use a lot of water in terms of diluting the chemicals that we then use for processing, for colouring things, for coatings, and so on. So therefore, when we think about, what's better, synthetics coming from oil or natural fabrics coming from the earth, it's not really a clear-cut answer. You could argue both ways, because cotton is not necessarily a solution to the problem of synthetics. So cotton used to be the most popular global fibre, but that has now been overtaken by polyester. So polyester has the largest global share of the market. I think we can see that when we go shopping. Most things are made out of polyester nowadays. And then the famous case study was shown on the Stacey Dooley documentary of the Aral Sea in Uzbekistan, which was completely drained, although it is coming back now. So one of the world's largest inland seas was completely drained due to mismanagement of water for cotton field irrigation. Well, the government is corrupt there, and there's other issues, but still we can see what a fundamental impact we can have by not managing environmental resources. Carbon footprint, again, very high for fashion, and statistics say up to 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions are responsible by the fashion industry. So most of the energy use comes in fibre extraction. So making the polymers from petrochemicals uses a lot of energy. In textile processing, dyeing, and finishing and so on, we use a lot of water, because there's lots of different successive processes in which we are heating water and so on, which uses energy. And plus we have the carbon emissions from the big amount of transportation that happens in terms of shipping things all over the world, both from producers to distribution outlets, but also in terms of consumers with online shopping, that has increased as well. So natural fibres do have a lower carbon footprint than synthetics, but again, it's difficult to pinpoint what is the best solution. And also the use phase is also significant. So if we look at the proportions of energy which is used in the average production, we can see that there's a lot which is in the production process, less so transportation and logistics, but also a significant amount in the consumer use phase when we are washing things. And again, that entails solutions around consumer behaviour. We associate cleanliness with water. So is it possible to feel clean? You know, there is a movement in raw denim where people don't wash their jeans, or they might just rinse them in seawater. But it's seen as, that is a better denim product rather than washing it in a washing machine at 40 degrees every week. But this would be a much long-term solution. And then we can see in terms of global fibre production, given that synthetic fibres have a higher carbon footprint and they are set to increase further over time, then we can see that the energy use is going to go up as well, given that we're on this model of increasing growth, assumed increased growth. Then we come on to chemical use. So we use a lot of chemicals both in the growing of natural fibres, so cotton uses much pesticides. In terms of organic cotton, that represents such a minute amount of cotton in total. It's only 1% of global market share is organic cotton. So that's probably why you find it difficult to find things on the high street that's made from organic cotton, because most of it is conventional cotton. So a lot of pesticides are used to kill the bugs and so on. That there is evidence that the largest wave of suicides in the world is by Indian cotton farmers. So you can look into the issues around the big pharmaceutical companies and how they sell them pesticides, and why eventually, if you watch the True Cost documentary, it shows you why they feel, they're in so much debt that the only solution is to go into the cotton fields and drink the pesticides. So it's not only environmental impact, but also big social impacts for some of the poorest nations in the world. In terms of, closed loop processing, still in a lot of countries, the dye effluent, the processing effluent is just left to go out into the local waterways. And again, this is where people are using the water to wash clothes in, wash children in, fish from, and so on. So it's pretty dangerous to human health. And we use chemicals in both for coloration. So colour is a really important part of fashion. It is possible to get natural dyes, but it's not really going to be a mass market solution because most consumers would prefer the more vivid colours and colour fastness that will last over a long time. And that's not really possible on scale with natural dyes. Coatings as well, so we have fantastic performance functionality from some of the coatings that have been developed, especially in performance wear, sportswear and so on. So durable water repellency, but these are all based on pretty nasty chemicals that have been found to be toxic to human health. And you can read any of the Greenpeace reports to see that these chemicals are used across the board. It's not just fast fashion manufacturers, but it's big brands, premium brands, it's everybody. But we are trying to limit some of these that are being used because we've seen what the negative effects are. So they are toxic, they are bioaccumulative, so that means they don't break down in nature, so they go into the rivers, the fish eat them, the fish can't process them out of their body, so they build up, and then if we're buying the fish, then we are effectively ingesting them. They're found to be hormone disruptive in nature and also cancer causing. So pretty nasty. And then, of course, looking beyond fabrics, but also looking at leather and the processing of leather, the tanning process, tends to rely on heavy metals such as cadmium and arsenic, which are still legal in most developing countries where the tanneries are located. The issue here is that there aren't really any alternatives for this, and because the performance of these chemicals is so good, consumers love the performance. They like the idea of buying a wrinkle-free shirt that they don't need to iron. So it's really about adjusting consumer expectations about things. So Patagonia said recently that they feel their customer is not going to be so hung up about having a really smooth shirt. They're outdoor, rugged kind of customer, so they're going to do away with wrinkle-free coating because they believe that the bad effects are not worth the performance attributes. But again, some of that comes down to customer expectations. And then finally, textile waste. So this is becoming an ever-increasing problem because of the greater volume of clothing that is being produced, the shorter lifetime that it is being used for, and the quicker disposal of items. And we have some of the highest rates in the world in the UK as well as in the US. So in the UK, we consume on average at least 10 kilos more per person than our next European neighbours in France, Italy or Germany. So why do UK consumers consume significantly more? Something to think about. In terms of used textile collection, we have a pretty good network in the UK, but that's not the case in all countries. So in some countries, only maybe 10% of used textiles are collected. So, if we're thinking about this closed loop chain where old garments can be remade into new garments, we don't have the infrastructure yet. Some of that is around customers not understanding what can be recycled. Some of that is around not having the infrastructure to actually drop things off somewhere. And so on. So we end up that actually less than 1% of all collected garments is actually made into new garments. So when you take your stuff to H&M and they say they will recycle it, it tends to be recycled into lower grade applications such as industrial rags, mattress stuffing, and so on. It's not made into a new blouse or anything. We do have recycled yarns nowadays, so there is recycled polyester yarn, which you may have seen in the market, but in terms of market share, it's only about 14%, so most polyester yarn is virgin polyester yarn. So it's still not being used by most of the industry. And in fact, the evidence suggests that the best environmental solution would be to increase the active use time of our garments, which would reduce the relative environmental impact, and it would also reduce the amount of new stuff that needs to be produced. But whether or not this is possible. So the solutions, really, there's loads and loads of solutions. Not all of them are scalable or at scale yet, but there's certainly lots of innovations, lots of ideas here. Some of them are scientific, some of them are technological, some of them are really about mindsets and morals and people's thoughts, consumer thoughts. But in terms of systemic change, people say, how can we actually make a change? Because at the moment, the system is based on assumed unlimited growth. But there's very few businesses, if any, that have said, we want to slow our growth or we want to go into degrowth. I think only Patagonia would come to mind, but mostly all other companies, shareholder expectations and so on, the capitalist business model, it's all about grow, 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 isn't it? Which is making more stuff. We need to decouple revenues from, single sales. So how can a company build a revenue stream on an extended use of a garment rather than just a single sale? Because most businesses are based on selling more stuff. How can we actually change human mindsets that new is not necessarily better? So I'm sure we all know the feeling of buying some new gear and how nice it feels for a few seconds when you buy something new and it's brand new rather than second hand. But we're seeing some brands are kind of proposing that used is good, and also how to then decouple from this linear business model towards a more circular approach. So there are ways of doing this. There's ways of dyeing without water, using carbon dioxide instead of water. We can use waste instead of virgin raw materials. So this is ocean plastic waste. We can use biofibers to replace synthetics and so on. We can design collections that are more investment pieces, and we can put forward trends that are not based on shiny, squeaky new things. But at the moment, we need a big system change.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think we've got some time to have some few questions then, and then we'll have a second speaker. But okay, anybody got any questions? Thank you.
Yeah, I wonder if I could ask, I was working with you over the summer, and what struck me in the markets is really the amount of high profile, a lot of, it appears from high-income countries, the clothing that's been shipped over there and the impact that it's actually having on the local, perhaps fashion or really what people are wearing, definitely.
Yeah.
So the question is about shipping our fashion over to other countries like Uganda, so they're using our fashion and what impact that would have on their local economy.
So this was our traditional solution. We would collect all the stuff that can't be sold in a charity shop and then ship it to a developing country where, of course, they're really grateful to have our worn-out Western garments. But increasingly, these developing countries, especially in Africa, they are banning the import of second-hand goods. So we can't rely on that as a solution anymore. We need to deal with our own waste, and it does harm the domestic economy. So it's not the case that they're really grateful to have our Western cast-offs, because especially now it ends up being, you know, old, worn Primark stuff, which they can't even sell on really, so it's not what they want. It's not like second-hand designer stuff, is it? Yes.
Any other questions? Yeah?
So the UK inquiry into almost political pays model, is there any legislation being proposed at the moment through the inquiry, or any draft legislation that's going to be passed through Parliament?
Through the Environmental Audit Committee, no, the government rejected all the proposals. So we're actually behind some of our European neighbours in terms of infrastructure and system building. So you can have a look at the report and see what was suggested, such as things like a 1p garment tax, VAT-free repair services, bringing back mending skills into schools and so on. There was lots of different things that were suggested, and the government rejected all of them. So we in the UK are sort of behind in some of our ideas and our legislation, our regulations, than what's happening in, you know, Sweden and so on.
Thank you. Question here at the front.
Sorry, on this last slide you were saying something about companies like taking less value from like profit made per sale. Like I just wanted to know what exactly you meant by that.
So rental businesses, or yeah, there's different business models where you're not selling stuff. So can we sell a service? So people still want to wear fashion, but they don't need to own it. So how can we separate use from ownership? So if any of you are in London, one of my friends is doing a pop-up digital sustainable fashion shop on the 17th. I can tell you details afterwards, where you bring in currency. So you don't pay, but you bring in a used garment, and then that will be donated to Love Not Landfill. And then you can use that currency to have a digital fashion garment. So you may have heard there is a few people that are like Carlings is a Danish company. So you can pay €30 for a digital fashion, piece of digital fashion that you superimpose onto a photo of yourself.
Wow.
So for the generation which is ordering 50 million things from ASOS just to take a selfie and then sending it all back, this could be a solution, because they don't need to own the pieces, they just need access to something. If you want the piece to take an Instagram selfie, it doesn't need to be a physical garment and all the work that goes into it. So there's some, yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, can it be mass market though?
Fabulous. Question here.
So I work with an agency that have just been involved with fabric manufacturer in the Far East, who are a client, and also a sports brand based in Scandinavia. Both are incredibly environmentally conscious set of people, and they came together, and football shirts, I'm not going to mention the clubs or the brands because I don't think it's the right thing to do right now, but they put shirts on 7 football teams in the UK, and all of those shirts are dyed without using water, so they have dry dye technology. In the presentation of the campaign at the agency, what came through were some unbelievably powerful stats. For example, 25 litres of water to dye 1 football shirt, and the volume of the med being emptied every 2 years for the fashion industry. And we were asked to kind of crank up the statistical impact for one group of people based in America. And we showed a model of a baseball stadium where everybody was wearing a t-shirt that was a tribute t-shirt to this one baseball player. And we calculated that the number of t-shirts that were being worn and the amount of water used to dye those t-shirts was the equivalent of the daily requirement of 19,000 people.
Yeah, it's frightening,
so
isn't it?
yeah.
It's frightening.
It's a very long way around
Yeah.
for me to ask the question. How can consciously, how aware and how conscious do you think people are of these absolutely mind-blowing stats?
Not
are
at
they
all.
in the consciousness
Yeah.
of the public?
I don't think so. And we saw
Should
when
they be?
Stacey Dooley went out onto the street and people were flabbergasted, because you can't even imagine what 3,000 litres of water looks like. So she had these big tanks and said, this is what 3,000 litres of water looks like. But we're very lucky. We live in a country where we can use drinking water to clean our toilets with. In a lot of countries, water is not drinkable anyway, is it? So I think it's hard to expect people in more privileged environments to really understand this, because we're not seeing the negative impact, are we?
I think
And all the rain we have, we think,
yeah,
plenty of water going around, isn't there?
I think I struggle with this, is like you've already pointed out, that synthetic versus cotton. If somebody does want to change their behaviour, we can go to charity shops, keep them for longer, but also those choices that we're given. Do you have any recommendations, or is it just really depends on the process used? Should we go for cotton? Should we go for natural? Should we go for organic?
It's really hard, isn't it? Because you don't
Because that's
always
what we're all struggling with, that
information.
decision, aren't we?
Yeah, next year the Sustainable Apparel Coalition will come out, will launch a consumer-facing label on environmental sustainability. So hopefully that will be digestible for people, because at the moment you'd need to be an expert to go into a store and weigh things up. You don't have the information, do you? And it's difficult. So
it's difficult to make that sustainable, ethical decision, isn't it, at the moment?
Yes, you don't know where things have come from, so very few brands will have full transparency, so you can make an informed decision. So the best thing we can do is try and be more considered in our purchase and ask brands to clean up their act.
Buy less.
Try and buy less, share. I went to a clothes swap for the first time this year, so
yeah.
I'm trying.
Yeah. Right, thank you very much. And we have a
There's
round
one
of
more.
applause. Oh, we've got
one more there. Yeah.
All right then. Then we need to go to the next.
There's obviously a lot of bad examples. Are there any good examples of, say, like closed loop or countries moving to a more integrated system of infrastructure?
So, is any good examples?
Yeah, some of the luxury players are doing lots of work in this area. So Xuqing, which is parent group for Gucci, Puma, and was Stella McCartney before, they're doing a lot of pioneering work around really mapping out their supply chain and changing things. Some of the big sportswear brands are doing waterless dyeing and waste as a material. And then there's smaller brands. We have Beaumont Organic here in Manchester, which is a smaller brand, but everything's natural, everything's organic, it's a small supply chain and so on. So there's different ways that people are doing things. And even the likes of H&M, we do criticise them because they are responsible for putting so much stuff out, but really they're the only ones with the scale and the resources and the voice that's big enough to try and implement change. So Zalando just announced last week it was going carbon neutral in its supply chain. So that's a big, commitment statement, isn't it? Which is hopefully going to push out into the rest of the industry at some point.
Well, thank you very much. I'm sorry, we're really going to have to move on. I know we've got lots of questions. So can we thank Patsy? So I'm going to welcome our second speaker today. Hopefully he's going to come up with some innovation and some possible solutions and what scientists here at the University of Manchester are doing around this issue. So I'd like to welcome Dr. Xuqing Lu, who's a research fellow here at the University of Manchester in the School of Materials. His expertise includes the development of functional fashion, so hopefully we'll hear about what that means, and the sustainable development of the textile industry around waste textiles, garments regeneration, natural dyes, some of the things that Patsy's been talking about. So thank you, Xuqing, and he'll take
it's very hard to pronounce. This always make people confused. So I am a research fellow in the Department of Materials. My theme is fashion technology. Not like Patsy is very fashion. I'm a geek. So I change a new shoe, but it's seems not very fashion. But however, be aware about the technology. My research is in technology, in fashion technology. So this is the reason why I look like a geek. So my undergraduate in the chemistry department. Then in my PhD, I was in the garment and the textile manufacturing. So today I will introduce a little bit about the background about textile waste regeneration. From Patsy's slide, I also learned a lot about. I believe all of you have learned about textile waste. This is very important. environmental problem from the fast fashion. Everybody like fashion. It's very fashion. It's colorful, very beautiful. Some expensive garment or some cheaper fast fashion. It's depending on different styles or the price. It doesn't matter. All of them will be disposed. So this is the reason. It will cost textile waste. There is no kind of permanent textile or garment. It's never. So we can make we can use the different textile waste management process. I get this data from the United States Environmental Protection Agency just for the textile waste. About the most of textile waste or garment waste will directly go to the landfill, and with cause the big problem, environmental problem for the water pollution. And maybe you have learned about some new newspaper or some social media that for a drop of seawater contains many microfibers for the water, even as well as in the soil. So, but we can see that most of the textile waste directly go to the landfill. About 10% to be recycled. Also, in some European countries, they use the waste textile to produce the electrical energy, but the cause another big problem for the environmental problem, for the air pollution. Too many carbon dioxide is the green gas. So this is the problem of current textile waste management. So we try to recycle the textile, the waste garment, the waste fashion. How to recycle it? So I'm not sure your background. I found some from the fashion. I'm not sure others. Introduce a little bit about the how to make a garment. Normally, garment is made from fiber, then spinning into yarn. Then during weaving and knitting technology, we can assemble this yarn into a fabric. This fabric. The last step is sewing and another cutting and sewing technology to manufacturing the garment. This is the whole production layer from some major steps for the garment production. But how to recycle it? I summarize today. Go back from the garment, fabric, yarn, and fiber. From this 4 levels to recycle here. I summarize here. So first, when we collect all the recycled garments, the first thing we need to do is grading, to select. Normally, currently the grading is by hand, it's still by hand in some developing country. Some garment is still, sometimes it's never used, it's unveiled, it still has the wearability. If this garment still has the wearability, it will be directly going to the market of second-hand market. That we can see this data during the recent years, it increased a lot. It should be your part, but for the second-hand garment market, it increased a lot. Even Astar's, the supermarket also have a special to put some supermarkets as a second-hand clothing market. So it's the second-hand garment market increased a lot. So, but this all is based on the textile waste, which still have the wearability. So, if this garment is broken, it cannot used as a garment. What will be used? Can you remember for the last second? Let's go to the fabric. Oh, sorry, a typo here. This should be fabric. So for fabric, that we have learned a lot of how to recycle the used fabric. You can use cutting to design to different another application. For example, design for another protective clothes for in the kitchen. Also, some handmade artwork. For example, this one is very beautiful, and also handmade shopping bags. It will how to reuse this garment, but not as a garment. It's no wearability. It's still can use as a fabric. It's still as a fabric. And also we can use the weaving clothes. But what's the limitation for this kind of reuse as a fabric? It cannot be scaled up. It's still focused on the homemade products. The only thing they can scale up is the weaving clothes, weaving fabric. It's used for industry to clean some oil, environment also absorb some water. This is the only use. But most of them using the fabric is still focusing on homemade artwork of homemade fabric and also some shopping bag. This is very. I also attended some other seminars on how to use this. Most of the workshop are teaching people how to use reuse the garments in your home, how to cut it to design some shopping bags or some any different artworks. This is how to use as a fabric. But some fabric is broken. It cannot be used as a fabric. Go back to the last. Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Go back to the last step. Use as a yarn. This technology is well developed. How to collect use the yarn. For example, we can collect some waste garment, and even it cannot be used as a fabric. But depending on different color, we can still spinning into this fiber into yarn. But all this yarn show the yarn spinnability. If all the fiber lost the spinnability, it's depending on the length of fiber. If the fiber is still long enough, it can spin into yarn, can directly go to the garment manufacturing chain. But if it cannot be reused, the yarn, because the last level for the currently all the garment, all the textile waste regeneration step. For example, if broken, it's very common that the fabric is broken or the yarn is broken. So it's well established. You can say that we collect the fiber, but mixed with a different color. We can see that mixed with different color. What is the end use for the? If cannot use as a yarn. So in this level, we can only use as a fiber. We use non-woven technology. We can say there's a low quality material can produce into item as the carpet or the padding for the padding or for some thermal insulation equipment. And also this is for the construction material. Currently in UK, most of the waste paper they can use in the construction material for the heat and sound insulation material. So this as a kind of is the fiber level, but for some, even it cannot be used as a fiber. Even it cannot be used as a fiber. We will, in my research, I will introduce. But for all the reusability of the fiber, we can reuse as a second-hand market and reuse as a fabric, reuse as a fiber. But what will be the end? Even this kind of reuse the garment, reuse the fabric, reuse the fiber, it's still going to the fair field. But also we can find this is news from the research news from the body of the page. We can find some microfiber. Most of the microfiber pollution is from fashion waste, from the textile waste. So because it's very tiny, so then this kind of pollution, this hidden microfiber in our DNA will directly go to in our smudge, our body. It's not save the world, it's save ourselves, our human ourselves. So how to solve this problem? Even we can reuse the different level, reuse the garment, reuse the fabric, reuse the yarn, even reuse the fiber. For some other industry, I know that in Manchester normally the blue bin that for collects the plastic for the waste plastic. It's well established technology now. It's how to recycle the plastic bottom. Even in the past slides, he introduced some brands. They use the recycled bottom to produce some regenerated fiber, like use the polyester, even nylon. We can how to recycle. If this fiber is pure plastic, we can reuse in this process. It's much easier. It's because it's well established. But what is more difficult for fashion, for garments, because you can find the label for your garments. It's always mixed. The natural fiber and the synthetic fiber. For natural fiber, normally wool, cotton, wool, and silk. For synthetic fiber, it's polyester, nylon, and PN fiber. So for the natural fiber, it's impossible to use currently well-established process like this process to recycle as or regenerate the fiber. So because wool fiber and cotton fiber cannot be melted during temperature increase. So this is a problem. So my background, I introduced a little bit, is the chemistry. So I focus on how to reuse this kind of textile waste from the molecular level. So behind the fiber level, we still have a molecular level. So I try to do some research in the molecular level, how to reuse this. So introduce. I mentioned that for our blend garments, normally about this half cotton and half polyester. This is the most common fabric in our. For example, the t-shirt, skirt, most of them is mixed by cotton and polyester. The reason why it's mixed with polyester, that's because the price of polyester is much cheaper than cotton. And cotton also shows some abilities for air permeability, moisture absorption. This makes the comfort property of the garment is very good. So this 50-50 cotton and polyester is the most common fabric from the material review. So how to separate them? For example, if we can separate the cotton, then we can use maybe some of you from garment or from fashion, you know, viscose. This is kind of regenerated cotton. That's only pure cotton. So if we can separate natural polymer and the synthetic polymer, for the synthetic polymer, we can use our well-established technology to use melt spinning to get some reused fiber. And for the natural polymer, we can use wet spinning process. It can dissolve in some solution to use wet spinning to get some new fiber. It's very hard to separate the natural polymer and the synthetic polymer. So because some research, so some company try to separate it, but there's many problems. For example, they use acid to dissolve the cotton. It will cause, we want to solve the one environmental problem, but if we introduce acid, we will introduce another pollution. This is water pollution. So we cannot solve the one problem, but introduce another one. So also there were hazardous substances from dye stuff, some stuff during the spinning. So how to use a more green process to separate them. So I introduced the iron liquid. This is the only in my group in the world. I introduced the iron. I designed a molecule. It can dissolve the natural polymer. More important, it's not like acid solution because it has a very low vapor pressure. So it's called green solvent. It will not cause any environmental problem. So I designed one iron liquid, and I tried use a blending textile. We can see this is under microscope. This is a fabric. This is weaving structure, after dissolved in here, this solution, we can see 2 yarn disappeared here. Can you find it? The 2 yarn disappeared. This 2 yarn is a cotton yarn. So the cotton can dissolve in the solution. And the following is only polyester. We can use very traditional or well-established technology to recycle the polyester. So this is a demonstration. We use heating. We can control the temperature to 100 to even to 300. It can, the cotton, wool, silk, this kind of natural fiber can directly dissolve in the solution. And then we can get a cotton and wool solution and left the polyester. And I use the wet spinning process, this kind of regenerated fiber. This is from a waist skirt we can get. Why the color is black? Because it's have some dye stuff on the outside. There is no white. Normally we don't develop well a white skirt. Normally it's colorful. Some color stuff can during a carbonization high temperature it change the color to dark. So this is the reason why the regenerative fiber is dark here. So I do many research here, but most of you are not from the chemistry background. So you only introduce here this regenerated cotton fiber, and also this is cotton and wool fiber. Because for the textile waste, it's very hard to separate the wool and the cotton. But however, using my technology, I can make them together to create some new fiber. And with the percentage of wool fiber, this kind of fiber was very absorption. The absorption is very good to absorb the moisture. It's higher than currently wool fiber, so it's a very good fiber. And for the whole concept of currently how to separate the natural fiber is here. That's we get the textile waste, and for the cotton-based. The cellulose-based cotton fiber and the protein-based wool fiber and the silk fiber can directly dissolve in the iron liquid. These are green chemistries. And for the other synthetic fiber, we can use our well-established melt spinning to get some new fiber. But for the dissolved fiber, we can use some wet spinning to get. But more importantly, the solution can be recycled. The solution can be recycled. It can use the solution dissolved the natural fiber, and then the solution can be recycled to reuse to dissolve the falling waste. So this is called a green chemistry approach. I designed this. This is a green chemistry approach. So here is some example for how to use inox liquid to recycle in my lab. For example, this old clothes is about half and half wool and viscose. Then, because viscose is also kind of regenerated fiber, so we try to make sure our technology is can regenerated not only one generation, it can regenerate forever. So we use the viscose that we found that we dissolve the viscose and the wool, and then we mix with the other synthetic fiber to develop a new fiber, even have some color, but the color can change. If it's pure keratin fiber, the color will be dark, but if we mix with about half synthetic polymer, the color is a light yellow, like brownie, like your hair color, blondie. And also the second example, we use some wood textile with some dye stuff that we also very fundamental research that we can also regenerate it. We can very uniform fiber. So this fiber can spin into yarn, can use in any area for the garment, for different, even for industry textile, it can use very widely. Also, we make sure that from the chemical level, we make sure that we get the right. All the polymer is not destroyed during this process. It still keeps the original polymer change. But if you use the acid to dissolve the cotton or the wool, the polymer structure will be destroyed. It cannot reuse as a normal polymer. The spinability of the polymer will lost. So The following, I also use the recycle. This is the cotton. But this time I rise the temperature. It's very high to get some powder, not directly use wet spinning, to get some powder, and also use where we establish the melt spinning process mixed with the polypropylene. We also can get very beautiful color and the very beautiful color fiber. So this is the 3 examples for how to use the green chemistry. So from the process, so we call that recycled green chemicals. This can dissolve. We use the green chemicals and recycle. So then we can dissolve the natural polymer and the natural polymer cellulose and the keratin, and then separate it. For the synthetic engineering polymer, we can use melt spinning to get different well-established technology. But for the regenerated cellulose and keratin, we can use wet spinning. Also used as a powder mixed with the melt spinning together. So, but however, this cycle can be cycled, not cycled. Even it's lost the usability as a wearable usability or a spinnable usability, they can use from the molecular level. We can recycle it molecular level. So help use our green chemistry process, we can return the green to our plant for this earth. Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you very much. That was fascinating. A bit of a whistle-stop tour, and hopefully, I think we really picked up on your passion and about this is a new method for recycling and maybe dealing with some of the fast fashion issues that Patsy was talking about. I think we're really running out of time, but is there any couple of very quick questions we've got from the audience? Do you have a quick question?
Yeah.
Thank you for your nice presentation. As you see, one of the solutions for minimizing the environmental impact.
Yeah.
As you know, your recycling technology, it requires extra man-machine materials and the resource involvement. So it directly or indirectly affects the overall cost, or maybe it have other environmental impacts.
Yeah.
So how these issues could be introduced?
I didn't calculate the cost. This is what I want to collaborate with the parties together to do. Yeah, this is very important research. The manuscript did not finish now. The following will be your party. We will, working process. Yeah. Thank you. It's a very good question, very good point.
One at the back.
So, I'm sorry if you covered this and I missed it, but the solvent, after you've used it, can you reuse that solvent?
Yeah.
Or is the solvent going to waste?
The solvent is reusability is very good. So this is the reason why I call it the green solvent.
Right, well, thank you very much. I'm very aware of the time, so can we give one last round of applause to the speakers? Thank you very much.